Hello, this is the Radical Reviewer, taking a look at Animal Farm by George Orwell, Sackram Warburg Press, 1945. The key idea of this text is that positive movements and ideologies can be corrupted by power, coercion, and false justification. This is a story about animals being radicalized, something I'm quite familiar with. This book is essentially the struggles of the Russian Revolution from inception until the end of World War II. For a general audience, especially those who've seen the animated movie, this is considered a cautionary tale about the dangers of state communism, or what Michael Prenti has called siege socialism. It's about the corrupting power of bureaucracy and state control. To a Marxist like myself, or a socialist like George Orwell himself, the story is more accurately described as a cautionary tale about the corrupting influences of power and of the corrosive influences of capitalism's perks of inequality. Let's look at the narrative in detail. In a way, once you attach characters and places to their historical counterparts, the text essentially tells itself. Mr. Jones of Manor Farm is the Tsar of Russia. Mr. Pinkleton of Foxwood Farm represents England. Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield Farm is Germany. Mr. Whymper represents the free market and capitalist trade. The pig Old Major is Karl Marx. The pig Napoleon is Stalin. The pig Snowball is Trotsky. The pig Squealer is the media. The horse Boxer is the working class. The horse Clover is Boxer's wife. The horse Molly is the petty bourgeoisie. The dogs are the police and military. The cat is the petty criminal class. The rats are homeless peasants. The crow, Moses, is religion. The hens are the peasants. The pigeons are the spread of revolutionary ideals. The goat Muriel is the hesitant elderly. And the donkey, Old Benjamin, Boxer's best friend, is the political cynics. With all major characters laid out, the story and corresponding history goes as follows. Mr. Jones, as the Russian Tsar, is a drunk who mismanages the farm. Old Major, as Marx, explains the theory of animal exploitation and the need for animal revolution. For example, stating, all the habits of man are evil. Above all, no animal must tyrannize over his own kind. The weak or strong, the clever or simple, we are all brothers. No animal must ever kill another animal. All animals are equal. However, Old Major dies before the revolution is fulfilled. As Mr. Jones continues to misrun the farm, the animals' lives become harder and they revolt and drive out Mr. Jones and rename the farm Animal Farm. The animals destroy all the relics of Mr. Jones's rule. Boxer even destroys a hat which he likes, showing that ideology can be uncompromising. Snowball, as Trotsky, organizes the ideals of animalism, aka communism. The working class, Boxer, and Clover are on board. Yet Molly, the petty bourgeoisie, asks if there will be any sugar after the revolution. And Moses, as religion, warns the animals that revolution is not the answer, but instead Sugar Candy Mountain, aka heaven, is the answer. The animals finalize their revolution with 7 commandments written on the side of a barn, which read, 1. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. 2. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wings is a friend. 3. No animal shall wear clothes. 4. No animal shall sleep in a bed. 5. No animal shall drink alcohol. 6. No animal shall kill any other animal. And 7. All animals are equal. Then comes the work of the revolution. At first, everything is equal. There is equality in the work. There is equality in the General Assembly. Yet, as Michael Albert explains when talking about balanced job complexes, essentially, the pigs don't work, but instead manage worker activities and the planning, and so in the General Assembly, they control the debate, and this is the seeds of inequality. Many organizations and educational programs are set up by the pigs, but many of them fail. Animals who cannot memorize the 7 commandments are instead told to memorize 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which is added above the 7 commandments. This is similar to the Chinese proverb of cutting the foot to fit the shoe. The theory of animalism is now condensed to the point of being easily misinterpreted and meaningless, in the same way terms like freedom, liberty, and even terrorism are used today. As inequality increases, the pigs receive apples and other perks from the farm that other animals don't get. The pig Squealer, representing the media, explains to the other animals how this new arrangement is fair and just. At this point, the pigs start sending pigeons to other farms, spreading animalism's revolution. This is where other farms are introduced. Mr. Pinkleton of Foxwood Farm representing England and Mr. Frederick of Pinchfield Farm as Germany are both anxious about animal rebellion and hope to avoid worker rebellion in their own farms. In much the same way the New Deal in the US and other programs in the West sought to placate workers and curb worker rebellion in the US and Europe. As animal revolution and uprising spread through the land, farmers get together and invade Animal Farm. In the book, this incident is called the Return of Jones, or the Battle of Cowshed. In history, this is the Red October, which was a civil war between the Tsarist White Russians, backed by the US, England, and about 12 other nations, and the communist Bolsheviks. In the text and in history, the communist forces won. Snowball, as Trotsky, one of the two main leaders, begins to read books and comes up with great ideas to improve the farm. Most impressive of which is the idea for a windmill that will provide energy for the farm, for light bulbs, heated beds, and plumbing. The animals break into two factions, authoritarian Napoleon and revolutionary forward-thinking Snowball. Many animals support Snowball, but simple animals like the sheep support Napoleon and often interrupt debate, shouting 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. This symbolizes the way that slogans and sound bites can distort rational debate. The cynic Old Benjamin is the only animal that doesn't choose a faction to support and instead says, life will go on as it had always gone on. That is, badly. Molly, the petty bourgeoisie, starts receiving sugar from another farmer, aka the perks of capitalist imports, and she leaves Animal Farm. This shows that in equality, those who are used to the perks of inequality will be motivated to obtain their previously unequal lifestyle. At the same time, there's an election between the pigs, Napoleon, and Snowball, and in the end, Napoleon brings out the dogs, aka the police and military, which he had been secretly training, and Snowball is run off the farm, and Napoleon becomes the dictator of Animal Farm. As things continue to deteriorate, a windmill is put into construction, with the horse boxer and the donkey Old Benjamin leading the construction. Napoleon claims the windmill was his idea all along. This represents the forced industrialization of the Soviet Union, as the animals work like slaves to industrialize, while the pigs eat high on the hog. Pun intended. Soon, trade with other farms is introduced, symbolizing capitalist trade. The pigs move into Mr. Jones's house, and the 7 commandments are changed for the first time. Commandment 4 is changed to read, "No animal shall sleep in a bed without sheets." Animals try to remember what the commandment used to say, but are soon convinced that no change was made. A storm comes and destroys the windmill, which in history represents the failure of the 5-year plan for industrialization. Napoleon blames the destruction on Snowball, who is from now on slowly vilified and scapegoated, and Snowball's part in the revolution is reinterpreted to make him an enemy. The windmill is set to be rebuilt even bigger despite winter approaching. As things continue to go wrong, rumors of Snowball and his agent provocateurs are always blamed. Napoleon calls a meeting together and uses his dogs to catch Snowball's spies. Several pigs are brought forward, and the pigs, in fear, admit that they have collaborated with Snowball to destroy the windmill, and Napoleon's dogs kill them. Several other animals come forward to make confessions, and they are promptly killed. This is an example of Russia's political purges in the late 1930s, and symbolizes how a group's paranoia and instability can lead to self-destruction. Animal Farm is slowly becoming a police state. The horse Clover thinks to herself, they had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind, when fierce, growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes. There was no thought of rebellion or disobedience in her mind. She knew that, even as things were, they were far better off than had been in the days of Jones. It is shortly after this that the 6th commandment is changed to read, "No animal shall kill any other animal without cause." Again, the animals can't remember the original wording and so are convinced that no commandments have been changed. Animals hear about the mistreatment of other animals, aka the Holocaust, occurring on Pinchfield Farms, which represents Germany. Foreign policy is further introduced as goods are being offered to other farms. It is thought that Napoleon is negotiating with Pilkington of Foxwood Farm representing England, yet it turns out he is instead secretly negotiating with Pinchfield Farm. In history, this is the treaty between Russia and Germany. In the West, this is often referred to as a pact, or the meeting of the devils. Yet Michael Parenti critiques this view, arguing that Russia repeatedly asked for other European countries to form a pact with them against German aggression. But when this failed, Russia settled for agreement with Germany so that Russia could have a chance to build up its army. As negotiations go through, it turns out the money Animal Farm received from Pinchfield Farm was counterfeit, and another invasion of Animal Farm occurs. This time, the windmill is destroyed by the humans. In the text, this is called the Battle of the Windmill, referring to the Battle of Stalingrad in history, which is regarded as the bloodiest battle in history, in which almost 2 million people were killed, and it was the decisive victory of the Soviets over Nazism. After victory in the Battle of the Windmill, Napoleon and the other pigs drink whiskey, and a distillery is soon opened on the farm. The fifth commandment is changed to read, "No animal shall drink alcohol to excess." Shortly after this, Napoleon fathers 31 piglets, and Orwell writes, "The young pigs were given their instruction by Napoleon himself in the farmhouse kitchen. They took their exercise in the garden and were discouraged from playing with other animals. It is established that animals must step aside if a pig is walking towards them." As the animals' lives generally deteriorate, Moses, the crow, who symbolizes religion, returns, and the desperate animals now believe his talk about Sugar Candy Mountain. This symbolizes the causality between desperation and religious belief. Since the Battle of the Windmill, Boxer and Old Benjamin have once again begun working on recreating the windmill. Yet Boxer is getting old, and finally he is badly injured during construction. Napoleon makes arrangements for Boxer to be taken to a hospital, but as Boxer is loaded onto the van, Benjamin cries, "Fools! Fools!" And the animals realize that the van is for a horse slaughter/glue factory, and Boxer was sold for money. This symbolizes the Soviet Union selling out the working class. As an added irony, horses are used to pull the van, taking Boxer to slaughter. Despite everyone realizing the lie that has taken place, it is announced that Boxer died in the hospital, and Squealer, the media, explains that Boxer's last words were, "Forward in the name of rebellion. Long live Animal Farm, long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right." Years pass, and the animals continue to forget. They forget about life under Jones, the rebellion, Snowball, and Boxer. The windmill is never used for energy for lights and heating, as Snowball had promised, but instead to mill corn for profit. As Orwell states, "Only Old Benjamin professed to remember every detail of his long life and to know that things never had been, nor ever could be, much better or much worse. Hunger, hardship, and disappointment being, so he said, the unalterable law of life." As justification for their hardship, it is understood that if they went hungry, it was not from feeding tyrannical human beings. If they worked hard, at least they worked for themselves. No creature among them went upon 2 legs. No creature called any other creature master. All animals were equal. At this time, the sheep are further indoctrinated by the pigs. They march behind the pigs shouting, "4 legs good, 2 legs better," as the pigs march in front of them, walking on their hind legs. Here comes the first of the 2 large conclusions of the text. I'll quote at length. "Benjamin felt a nose nuzzling his shoulder. He looked around. It was Clover, her old eyes looking dimmer than ever. Without saying anything, she tugged gently at his mane and led him around to the end of the barn, where the 7 commandments were written. For a minute or two, they stood gazing at the tarred wall with its white lettering. 'My sight is failing,' she said finally. 'Even when I was young, I could not have read what was written there. But it appears to me that the wall looks different. Are the 7 commandments the same as they used to be, Benjamin?' For once Benjamin consented to break his rule, and he read out to her what was written on the wall. There was nothing now except a single commandment. It ran, 'All animals equal, but some animals are more equal than others.' This is the completion of Animal Farm's abandonment of animalism's founding principles. It is important because by moving from a human level of justification and reasoning to a so-called animal level, the text makes blatant what in real life is done abstrusely, namely, an organization's betrayal of its most basic principles. It was now that the pigs began using whips and wearing Mr. Jones's clothing. The book ends with human farmers meeting with the pigs in Mr. Jones's house, and the pigs explain that the animals are now more exploited than ever, and that the farm is more profitable than ever, and that the pigs will help humans make their farms just as exploited. The text ends stating, 12 voices were shouting in anger, and they were all alike. No question now what had happened to the faces of the pigs. The creatures outside looked from pig to man, and from man to pig, and from pig to man again. But already it was impossible to say which was which. In conclusion, this has now become a familiar story and a trope in itself. There's of course Animal Farm the animated movie, which has been changed from the text slightly to have a more anti-communist message, another reason why the general public sees the text as an anti-communist cautionary tale. There's also Dead Prez's song, Animal and Man, which is the story in music form. Similar stories have also been told. For example, the film Snowpiercer. Here, Old Man Gillian represents Marx. The leader Curtis is Lenin, wanting things to be better but failing. The sidekick Edgar is the working class who is sacrificed for change. And Wilford represents the capitalist system. Similarly, the movie Mouth to Mouth follows a radical group of homeless youth whose abrasiveness and fear of destruction lead them to becoming what they hate. The male leader of the group represents the pig Napoleon, the nurse represents Snowball the idealist, and their farming collective represents the slowly changing Animal Farm. Although I'd said the story writes itself, for example, the story could just as easily have been about fruit, with Marx as a mango, Stalin as a lemon, etc., it doesn't make the story pointless. In fact, as I said in the conclusion, Animal Farm takes the entirety and complexity of the Soviet Union, and by putting it in a so-called animal level of rationality and logic, makes these complex ideas digestible. In addition to telling the historical story, there are several major themes to the text. For example, the slow changing of revolutionary ideas, much in the way U.S. constitutional amendments and ideals are slowly reinterpreted. Orwell chronicles the slow change from revolutionary paradise to a farm in which the animals are exploited more than ever. Doublethink is also heavily used in the text, from the pigs being equal yet treated better, to Boxer's demise. The animals see one thing with their own eyes, and yet Squealer, the media, tells them something different. An often missed theme of the text is the corrosive effects of the perks procured under capitalism. For example, Molly leaving the farm so that she can have sugar cubes, the pigs engaging in trade with Mr. Whymper, and Pinchfield Farms for the perks that includes, and finally, the pigs' complete partnership with the humans. Another main theme is historical forgetting. As a dog myself, I was at first offended at the level of forgetfulness of the animals in the text, and the use of this so-called animal level of thinking. Yet it serves an accurate historical purpose. For example, after the September 11th attacks, a frequent cry was, "Why do they hate us?" Apparently, people forgot the U.S. support of Israel's occupation of Palestine, or the sanctions against Iraq, which had killed almost 2 million people, and the U.S. invasion of Iraq just 10 years prior, and the U.S. funding of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and the U.S. support of both sides of the Iraq-Iran war, and the U.S. overthrow of democratically elected leaders in Iran and Iraq, etc., etc. Even in the last few years, I've spoken with intelligent adults who don't remember the Occupy movement of 2011, only 5 years ago as of the making of this video, and so it might seem silly in the text, but it turns out to be sadly and brutally accurate. Historical forgetting is a horrible barrier to democracy. As Milan Kundera famously stated, the struggle of man against power is the struggle of memory against forgetting. The lesson of the text is that ideologies can be corroded by the perks of different and even opposing ideologies. And as a member of a group, if we forget the past, we are susceptible to the false justifications of corrupted leaders. These lessons and more make this text a timeless masterpiece, and I highly recommend it. If you're interested in radical theory, looking for a book recommendation or whatever, you can get your radical book reviews here with the Radical Reviewer. Thanks for watching.